The void of space stretches endlessly, silent and vast, yet filled with an oppressive tension. In the distance, a monstrous fleet glides forward, an armada so immense it seems to blot out the stars themselves. Each vessel in the fleet is a dark, angular behemoth, its surface bristling with spines and glowing with an eerie, pulsating light. The ships move with flawless precision, as though they are not separate entities, but extensions of a single, unyielding will. This is the Zorvian Dominion, a hive-minded empire that has brought 60 star systems to their knees over the course of 400 relentless years. The Zorvians are not conquerors in the traditional sense. They do not seek wealth, resources, or even power. Their purpose is singular and terrifying, to assimilate all life into their collective, erasing individuality, silencing resistance, and folding entire civilizations into the cold, unfeeling embrace of their hive mind. To the Zorvians, there is no other, no concept of coexistence, only the inevitability of absorption. High above the scarred and burning planet of Dracos V, the flagship of the Zorvian fleet, the Eternal Dominion, looms like a predator savoring its prey. Its hull is a jagged, obsidian mass, pulsing faintly with the golden energy of its core. Inside the ship, the atmosphere is sterile and cold, devoid of life's warmth. Overseer Vraxis, the commander of the fleet, stands motionless at the center of the bridge. His form is tall and imposing, his exoskeletal armor gleaming under the dim, artificial light. His eyes, if they can be called that, are glowing slits, devoid of emotion, reflecting only the cold logic of the hive mind he serves. Before him, holograms flicker to life, displaying the surface of Dracos V. The planet's once thriving cities are now reduced to smoldering ruins. Its defenders, brave but hopelessly outmatched, have been crushed, their weapons shattered, their armies scattered. The cries of the planet's inhabitants echo faintly through intercepted transmissions, but Vraxis pays them no mind. To him, they are nothing more than noise, irrelevant distractions in the grand design of the Zorvian Dominion. Assimilation will proceed, Vraxis commands, his voice a low, mechanical monotone. It carries no anger, no triumph, only the inevitability of a predator closing its jaws around its prey. The crew, a collection of Zorvian drones, respond in perfect unison, their movements synchronized as though controlled by invisible strings. The fleet begins its final phase of conquest, preparing to absorb the remnants of Dracos V into the hive. But then, something unexpected happens. A sharp, unfamiliar signal cuts through the silence of the Zorvian communications network. The holograms on the bridge flicker and shift, replaced by the image of a small, sleek spacecraft. Its design is angular and efficient, its surface gleaming with a metallic sheen that is alien to Zorvian eyes. The ship hovers defiantly in the void, dwarfed by the massive Zorvian fleet, yet radiating a quiet, unshakable confidence. Inside the Eternal Dominion, Overseer Vraxis tilts his head slightly, a gesture of curiosity. The ship's transmission is garbled at first, its language unrecognizable. But the Zorvian translation algorithms work quickly, and soon, the message becomes clear. This is the United Sol Federation scout vessel Stellar Horizon. Your unprovoked attack on the peaceful people of Dracos has been observed. Further aggression will not be tolerated. You have been warned. The words hang in the air, bold and defiant. For a moment, there is silence on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. The drones pause, their movements halted as they await Vraxis's response. The Overseer's glowing eyes narrow slightly, his expression unreadable. A warning, he says, his tone devoid of amusement or concern. From an inferior species. He raises a clawed hand, gesturing toward the holographic display of the stellar horizon. Destroy it. The Zorvian fleet responds instantly. Weapons systems power up, energy surging along the spines of their ships as they lock onto the tiny vessel. But before the first shot can be fired, the stellar horizon vanishes. In a flash of light, the ship disappears into faster-than-light travel, leaving the Zorvian fleet behind. For the first time in centuries, Overseer Vraxis feels something faint, something distant, and unfamiliar. It is not fear. Such an emotion is alien to the Zorvian hive mind. It is curiosity, a flicker of interest at the audacity of this small, unknown species. But the feeling is fleeting, quickly buried beneath the cold, unyielding logic of the hive. Insignificant, Vraxis mutters, turning his attention back to the conquest of Draco's V. Yet, in the back of his mind, or what passes for a mind in the Zorvian hive, he cannot help but wonder, who are these humans, and what could they possibly hope to achieve against the unstoppable force of the Zorvian dominion? The fleet continues its advance, the stars themselves seeming to dim under its shadow. But somewhere, far from the burning ruins of Draco's V, the stellar horizon races toward Earth, carrying with it the first spark of resistance against an empire that has never known defeat. The stellar horizon hurtles through the cold expanse of space, its engines burning bright against the endless black. Inside, the air is heavy with silence, broken only by the faint hum of machinery and the occasional murmur of the crew. The weight of what they have seen presses down on them like an invisible force. Images of Draco's V, its cities reduced to ash, its people consumed by the relentless advance of the Zorvian dominion, replay in their minds. At the center of the ship's command deck stands Captain Elena Marquez, her posture rigid, her face a mask of composure that barely conceals the turmoil beneath. She is a woman forged in the fires of countless battles, her sharp eyes betraying both the scars of experience and an unyielding determination. Now, as she addresses her crew, her voice is steady, but her words carry the weight of grim reality. The Zorvians, she begins, her tone low and measured, are unlike anything we've ever faced. They are not conquerors in the way we understand. They don't negotiate. They don't bargain. They don't even hate. They simply take. They absorb everything, every life, every culture, every trace of individuality into their hive mind. To them, resistance isn't an obstacle. It's an inevitability they crushed without hesitation. Her words hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. Around her, the crew listens in silence, their faces pale with the weight of what they now know. Some clench their fists, others avert their eyes, but none speak. They all understand the gravity of their mission. What they've witnessed must reach Earth. The survival of humanity depends on it. As the stellar horizon approaches the Sol system, the familiar sight of Earth comes into view, a blue and green jewel suspended in the void, fragile yet defiant. The ship docks at the Orbital Defense Station, a massive structure bristling with weapons and sensors, its surface alive with the activity of soldiers and engineers. But even here, in the heart of humanity's strength, there is an undercurrent of unease, a sense that the calm before the storm is about to shatter. Captain Marquez strides through the station's corridors, her boots echoing against the metal floors. She carries herself with purpose, her presence commanding respect from those she passes. When she enters the chamber of the United Sol Federation's Security Council, the room falls silent. Seated around a long, curved table are Earth's most powerful leaders, admirals, generals, politicians, all of them turning their attention to the woman who has brought them news of an unimaginable threat. At the head of the table sits Admiral Victor Harlan, a man whose very presence seems to radiate authority. His face is lined with the marks of age and war, his silver hair cropped close to his head. He has seen more battles than most of the people in the room combined, and his eyes carry the weight of every loss, every hard-fought victory. As Captain Marquez stands before him, he gestures for her to speak. Without hesitation, she begins. Her voice is steady, but the urgency in her tone is unmistakable. She recounts the horrors of Draco's V, the annihilation of its defenses, the cold efficiency of the Zorvian fleet, the eerie, hive-like coordination of their forces. She describes the Eternal Dominion, the Zorvian flagship, a vessel so massive and alien that it seemed less like a ship and more like a force of nature. When she finishes, the room is deathly quiet. The council members exchange uneasy glances, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and dread. Admiral Harlan leans forward, his hands clasped tightly together. "Show them," he says simply. Captain Marquez nods and activates a holographic display. The room is bathed in a cold, blue light as images and recordings from the stellar horizon play out before them. The council watches in stunned silence as they see the Zorvian fleet in all its terrifying glory, rows upon rows of alien ships stretching into infinity, their weapons tearing through the defenses of Draco's V with effortless precision. They see the planet's surface, its cities burning, its people fleeing in vain. And finally, they see the stellar horizon's encounter with the Zorvian flagship, the brief but chilling exchange of words that left no doubt about the Zorvians' intentions. When the recordings end, the silence in the room is deafening. For a moment, no one speaks. Then Admiral Harlan rises to his feet, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We've faced impossible odds before," he says, his tone firm and resolute. "And we've survived. But this time, survival will require everything we've got." His words ignite a spark in the room. The council members nod in agreement, their initial fear giving way to determination. A vote is taken, and the decision is unanimous: humanity will not wait for the Zorvians to come to them. They will prepare for war. Across the solar system, the call to arms is sounded. Shipyards on Earth, Mars, and the moons of Jupiter come alive with activity, their forges burning day and night. Engineers work tirelessly to construct new warships and retrofit old ones, their efforts driven by the knowledge that every second counts. Factories churn out weapons and supplies, while soldiers undergo intense training, their resolve hardened by the knowledge of what is at stake. Among the new ships being prepared is the Solaris Vanguard, a battleship unlike any other. Sleek and deadly, it is equipped with experimental technology designed to give humanity a fighting chance against the Zorvian threat. Its captain, Darius Kane, is a man renowned for his unorthodox strategies and sharp intellect. Though his methods are often unconventional, his results are undeniable, and he is entrusted with one of humanity's greatest hopes. As the preparations continue, the weight of what lies ahead hangs over everyone. The Zorvians are coming, and the odds are grim. But humanity has faced extinction before, and each time, they have risen to the challenge. Now, as the stars themselves seem to tremble with the approach of the Zorvian fleet, the people of Earth steel themselves for what may be their greatest battle yet. The Solaris Vanguard drifted silently through the vast emptiness of the Vega expanse, its sleek, dark hull blending seamlessly with the void. The stars around it were distant and cold, their faint light doing little to pierce the oppressive darkness of this sparsely populated region. Inside the ship, the air was tense, every crew member on edge as they awaited the inevitable. They had been here for days, hidden in the shadows, their advanced stealth systems masking their presence from the ever-watchful eyes of the Zorvian Dominion. In the command deck, Captain Darius Kane stood at the center, his piercing gaze fixed on the holographic display that dominated the room. His face was calm, almost unnervingly so, but his sharp green eyes burned with a quiet intensity. Kane was not a man given to fear, but even he could feel the weight of what was coming. The Zorvians were unlike any enemy humanity had faced, a force of nature, cold and unrelenting. And now, they were coming. The silence was broken by the soft voice of Lieutenant Arya Voss, the ship's tactical officer. "Captain, we've detected movement on the outer edge of the system." "It's them." Kane nodded, his jaw tightening. "Bring it up." The holographic display shifted, revealing the Zorvian fleet as it emerged from the darkness. The sight was enough to send a chill through even the most hardened of the crew. The Eternal Dominion, the Zorvian flagship, loomed at the center of the formation, its jagged, obsidian hull pulsating faintly with golden energy. Around it, dozens of smaller ships moved with eerie precision, their angular designs bristling with weapons. The fleet was vast, a black tide that seemed to swallow the light of the stars themselves. The crew watched in horrified silence as the Zorvians descended upon the helpless colonies scattered across the vague expanse. The colonies' defenses, meager at best, were no match for the alien onslaught. The Zorvian ships struck with surgical precision, their weapons tearing through shields and hulls with terrifying ease. Explosions lit up the void, brief flashes of light quickly swallowed by the darkness. On the bridge, the tension was palpable. Every member of the crew felt the same helpless rage, the same sickening horror as they watched the slaughter unfold. But their orders were clear: observe and report. Kane's voice broke the silence, low and steady. Record everything. We need to know how they move, how they fight. For hours, the Solaris vanguard remained hidden, a silent observer to the Zorvian fleet's relentless advance. The crew's anger simmered beneath the surface, their fists clenched, their jaws tight. But they said nothing. They knew the stakes. Then, something happened that shattered the fragile calm. "Captain," Voss said sharply, her voice filled with urgency. "We've got a civilian transport trying to leave the system. They are heading straight for the perimeter." Kane's eyes snapped to the display. The transport was a small, outdated vessel, its engines struggling to propel it away from the chaos. It was clear the ship had no chance of outrunning the Zorvian fleet. And the Zorvians had noticed. A Zorvian destroyer, sleek and deadly, broke away from the main formation, its weapons locking onto the fleeing transport. The crew of the Solaris Vanguard watched in horror as the alien ship closed the distance, its intentions unmistakable. "They are going to kill them," Voss said, her voice trembling with anger. "We can't just sit here and watch." Kane didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the display, his mind racing. Every instinct screamed at him to act, but he knew the risks. Their orders were clear. If they revealed themselves now, the Zorvians would know humanity was no longer a passive observer. The consequences could be catastrophic. But then he looked at the transport, at the desperate, flickering signal it was sending out, a plea for help that no one else could answer. Kane made his decision. "Bring weapons online," he said, his voice firm. "Target the destroyer." The crew hesitated for only a moment before springing into action. The air on the bridge crackled with tension as the Solaris Vanguard prepared to strike. The ship's experimental energy cannons hummed to life, their power building to a crescendo. "Fire," Kane commanded. The Solaris Vanguard emerged from the shadows, its sleek form cutting through the void like a predator. A volley of energy blasts erupted from its cannons, streaking across the darkness and slamming into the Zorvian destroyer. The alien ship shuddered under the impact, its shields flickering and failing as the energy blasts tore through its hull. On the transport, the crew and passengers watched in stunned disbelief as their would-be executioner was disabled. The Solaris Vanguard stood between them and the Zorvian fleet, its presence a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. "Transport is clear," Voss reported, her voice filled with relief. Kane nodded, but his expression remained grim. He knew what was coming. The Zorvian fleet reacted with terrifying speed. The Eternal Dominion shifted its massive bulk, its glowing core pulsing with a menacing light. The smaller ships moved in unison, their weapons locking onto the Solaris Vanguard. "They know we're here," Voss said, her voice tight with fear. Kane's jaw clenched. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We're not going down without a fight. The Solaris Vanguard sped away from the Zorvian fleet, its engines burning bright as it weaved through the void. Behind it, the Zorvian ships gave chase, their weapons lighting up the darkness with deadly precision. For the first time, the Zorvians had seen humanity's defiance. And now, the hunt had begun. In the cold, unfeeling heart of the Eternal Dominion, a vast chamber glowed with a sinister amber light. The walls pulsed faintly, alive with a rhythmic hum of Zorvian technology, their surfaces covered in flowing, alien symbols that seemed to shift and ripple like liquid. At the center of the room stood Overseer Vraxis, a towering figure cloaked in dark, chitinous armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. His form was both majestic and unnerving, his elongated limbs and angular features a perfect blend of precision and menace. Vraxis stood before a massive, circular display that floated in the air, its surface shimmering with captured footage of the recent encounter. The image of the Solaris Vanguard played on an endless loop, the human ship emerging from the shadows, its weapons blazing as it struck down the Zorvian destroyer. The Overseer's glowing eyes narrowed, his clawed hands clasped tightly behind his back. For centuries, the Zorvian Dominion had swept across the stars like an unrelenting tide, absorbing or annihilating every species in their path. Resistance was rare, and when it did arise, it was swiftly crushed. Yet here, in this insignificant corner of the galaxy, a species had dared to strike back, and worse, they had succeeded. The thought was both intriguing and infuriating. A low, guttural voice echoed through the chamber, resonating with a strange, otherworldly cadence. It was Vraxis, speaking to the collective hive mind that pulsed around him. "They are primitive," he said, his tone cold and analytical. "And yet, they possess a spark. Defiance. A refusal to submit." His claws flexed slightly, the sound of chitin scraping against chitin filling the room. "This cannot be tolerated." The display shifted, showing the Sol system Earth, its moon, and the scattered colonies of humanity's reach. Vraxis tilted his head, studying the image with a predatory intensity. "They will learn the cost of resistance," he declared. "Alter course. The Sol system will fall, and with it, their fragile hope." The hive mind responded instantly, a pulse of energy rippling through the room as the Zorvian fleet adjusted its trajectory. The stars themselves seemed to tremble as the Eternal Dominion turned its vast bulk toward Earth, its engines burning with the light of 1,000 suns. The hunt was on. Back on Earth, the mood was no less intense. In the Grand War Room of the United Sol Federation, Admiral Victor Harlan stood at the head of a long table, his grizzled features set in a deep frown. Around him, holographic displays projected images of the Zorvian fleet, their numbers vast and overwhelming. The room was filled with a low murmur of voices, officers and strategists debating, analyzing, and planning. But when Captain Darius Kane entered, the room fell silent. Kane's presence was commanding, his uniform crisp despite the long hours of battle and travel. His sharp eyes scanned the room, meeting Harlan's gaze with a mixture of defiance and respect. The Admiral gestured for him to approach, and Kane stepped forward, his boots echoing against the polished floor. "You've made quite the impression," Harlan said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "The first human ship to strike a blow against the Zorvians. That's no small feat." Kane inclined his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "We couldn't just sit and watch, sir. Those people needed us." Harlan nodded, his weathered face softening for a moment. "And I commend you for that. You saved lives, Captain. You showed courage when it mattered most." He paused, his gaze hardening. "But you've also shown them something else. You've shown them what we're capable of." The room grew tense, the weight of Harlan's words sinking in. Kane's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, waiting for the Admiral to continue. "Now they are coming for us," Harlan said, his voice low but firm. "The Zorvians don't tolerate resistance. They don't forget. And they don't forgive." Kane met the Admiral's gaze, his own eyes burning with determination. "Then we'll be ready." Harlan studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I hope so, Captain. Because this isn't just about survival anymore. It's about showing them that humanity won't go quietly into the dark." The room fell silent once more as the weight of the situation settled over everyone present. The Zorvians were coming, their fleet a storm on the horizon, and Earth was their target. But despite the fear, despite the overwhelming odds, there was a spark of defiance in the air, a spark that had been lit by the Solaris Vanguard and its captain. As Kane left the war room, his mind was already racing, planning, preparing. He knew the battle ahead would be unlike anything humanity had ever faced. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty: they would fight. And they would make the Zorvians remember that even the smallest spark could ignite a fire. The stars over Earth burned brighter than ever, a silent witness to the feverish activity below. The once orderly spaceports and orbital docks of the United Sol Federation were now chaotic hives of movement. Massive warships, their hulls gleaming with fresh plating and bristling with weaponry, were launched into the void one after another, their engines roaring with the promise of defiance. Smaller vessels swarmed around them like bees, ferrying supplies, personnel, and ammunition. The air on Earth itself buzzed with urgency, a collective determination that could be felt in every corner of the planet. In the sprawling military academies and training grounds, recruits and seasoned soldiers alike pushed themselves beyond their limits. The sound of drills echoed through the corridors, voices shouting commands, boots thundering against steel floors. Simulations of Zorvian tactics played out in holographic chambers, soldiers learning how to counter the alien precision that had decimated so many before them. Fear was present, but it was buried beneath a hardened resolve. This wasn't just a war for survival, it was a battle for the very essence of humanity. Amidst this whirlwind of preparation, the Solaris Vanguard stood in orbit, a symbol of hope and defiance. Its dark, angular form seemed almost alive, a predator waiting for its moment to strike. Inside, Captain Darius Kane and his crew worked tirelessly, their usual camaraderie replaced by a grim focus. Every system was checked, every weapon calibrated. They knew what was coming, and they knew they would be at the forefront of it. Kane stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the endless expanse of stars. His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Aria Voss, her sharp features set with determination. "Captain," she said, her voice steady. "The other ships in the task force have arrived." Kane turned, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Bring them up on the display." The holographic screen flickered to life, revealing the 3 warships that would join the Solaris Vanguard in the fight. Each one was a masterpiece of human engineering, designed with one purpose: to stand against the Zorvian tide. The luminous Resolve was the first to appear, its sleek, silver hull glowing faintly in the starlight. It was a ship built for speed and precision, its design elegant yet deadly. Next came the ironclad Sentinel, a massive, imposing vessel bristling with heavy armor and weaponry. Its sheer presence radiated strength, a fortress in the void. Finally, there was the Celestial Fury, a ship that seemed almost alive, its dark surface shimmering with a faint, otherworldly energy. It was the most experimental of the fleet, its weapons untested but rumored to be devastating. Kane studied the ships for a moment, then nodded. "Open a channel to the captains." The faces of the other 3 captains appeared on the display, each one reflecting the weight of the mission ahead. Captain Elena Sharp of the Luminous Resolve was the first to speak, her voice calm but firm. We're ready, Kane. What's the plan? Kane took a deep breath, his mind racing as he laid out the strategy they had devised. The Zorvians rely on their hive mind coordination. It's their greatest strength, but it's also their weakness. If we can disrupt it, even for a moment, we can throw them into disarray. He gestured to the holographic map, which shifted to display the Epsilon Crucible system. It was a treacherous region of space, filled with dense asteroid fields and gravitational anomalies. To most, it was a death trap. But to Kane, it was an opportunity. We'll use the asteroid fields to our advantage, he continued. The Zorvians won't be able to maneuver as easily as we can. We'll hit them hard and fast, then disappear before they can regroup. Captain Victor Steele of the ironclad Sentinel frowned, his rugged face etched with concern. Guerrilla tactics against the Zorvians? It's risky. If they catch us in the open, we're finished. Kane met his gaze, his voice unwavering. It's a risk we have to take. If we can delay their advance, even for a short time, it could give Earth the chance it needs to prepare. Captain Lyra Vane of the Celestial Fury leaned forward, her piercing blue eyes glinting with determination. And if we fail? Kane's jaw tightened. Then we make them bleed for every inch they take. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the plan settling over them. Finally, Sharp nodded. We're with you, Kane. Let's show them what humanity is capable of. The other captains voiced their agreement, and the channel closed. Kane turned back to Voss, his expression hard. Prepare the crew, he said. We leave for Epsilon Crucible at dawn. The journey to the Epsilon Crucible system was tense, the silence of space broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. When they arrived, the asteroid field stretched out before them like a labyrinth of jagged stone, illuminated by the faint light of a dying star. The ships moved carefully, their shields brushing against the edges of the massive rocks that drifted lazily through the void. Kane stood on the bridge, his eyes scanning the horizon. The Zorvians would come soon, he could feel it. And when they did, they would find humanity waiting for them, hidden in the shadows of the asteroids, ready to strike. This is where we make our stand, he said quietly, his voice filled with quiet determination. The crew nodded, their faces set with grim resolve. The task force was outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had never known defeat. But they were ready to fight. As the first Zorvian ships appeared on the edge of the system, their dark forms cutting through the void like blades, Kane felt a surge of defiance rise within him. All ships, he commanded, his voice steady. Hold position. Wait for my signal. The Zorvians advanced, their movements precise and unrelenting. But as they entered the asteroid field, their formation began to falter, the dense rocks forcing them to spread out. Kane's lips curled into a faint smile. Now, he said. The Solaris Vanguard and its allies erupted from their hiding places, their weapons blazing. The asteroid field lit up with flashes of light as the task force struck, their attacks swift and devastating. The Zorvians, caught off guard, struggled to respond, their hive mind momentarily disrupted by the chaos. For the first time, humanity was not running. They were fighting. And the Zorvians would remember this day. The silence of the Epsilon Crucible was shattered by the sudden eruption of fire and chaos. From the depths of the asteroid field, the human fleet struck like predators lying in wait. The Solaris Vanguard led the charge, its weapons blazing with a ferocity that lit up the dark expanse of space. Beams of energy sliced through the void, slamming into the sleek, angular forms of Zorvian ships. Explosions rippled across their hulls, sending debris spiraling into the asteroid field like shards of broken glass. The Zorvians, so accustomed to their hive mind precision and overwhelming numbers, faltered. Their ships, which often moved as one, hesitated as the humans darted in and out of the asteroid field, striking and disappearing like ghosts. The asteroid field itself became a labyrinth of death, the massive rocks spinning lazily through space, forcing the Zorvians to break formation. On the bridge of the Solaris Vanguard, Captain Darius Kane stood firm, his voice calm but sharp as he barked orders. Around him, his crew moved with practiced precision, their faces taut with focus. The ship trembled slightly as it fired another volley, the glow of its weapons illuminating the dark interior of the bridge. "Target their lead ships," Kane commanded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Keep them guessing. Don't give them time to regroup." The Solaris Vanguard swooped low, skimming the surface of a massive asteroid as it unleashed another barge. Two Zorvian ships, caught off guard, erupted in flames, their sleek forms breaking apart as the explosions consumed them. Cheers erupted from the crew, but Kane's expression remained grim. "They are adapting," he muttered, watching as the remaining Zorvian ships began to shift their tactics, spreading out to cover more ground. The hive mind was slow to adjust, but it was relentless. Meanwhile, the luminous Resolve darted through the chaos, its silver hull scarred and smoking from repeated hits. Captain Elena Sharp gripped the edge of her console, her knuckles white as she shouted over the alarms blaring throughout her ship. "Divert power to the shields," she ordered, her voice strained but unyielding. "We're not done yet." The luminous Resolve fired another volley, its shots striking true and crippling a Zorvian frigate. But the retaliation was swift. A massive beam of energy lanced through the void, slamming into the ship's side. The impact sent it spinning, its engines flickering as it struggled to stabilize. Sharp's crews scrambled to regain control, their faces pale but determined. "Captain," one of her officers called out, his voice tight with urgency. "We've lost primary weapons systems. Shields are failing." Sharp clenched her jaw, her mind racing. She glanced at the tactical display, seeing the Solaris Vanguard and the other ships still fighting, still holding the line. Her ship couldn't take much more, but she refused to leave without buying them as much time as possible. "Set a course for the outer edge of the field," she ordered. "We'll draw their fire away from the others." The luminous Resolve limped away, its engines sputtering as it moved toward the safety of open space. Zorvian ships pursued it, their weapons lighting up the darkness as they fired relentlessly. But the ship held on, its crew refusing to give in. Back on the Solaris Vanguard, Kane watched the luminous Resolve retreat, his chest tightening. He knew what Sharp was doing, and he hated it. But there was no time to dwell on it. The Zorvians were closing in, their ships adapting to the humans' hit-and-run tactics. "Deploy the jamming devices," Kane ordered, his voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. Lieutenant Aria Voss nodded, her fingers flying over the controls. "Jamming devices deployed," she confirmed. All around the battlefield, small, spherical devices were launched from the human ships, their surfaces crackling with energy. As they activated, a wave of electromagnetic interference rippled through the void, distorting the Zorvian sensors. The alien ships hesitated, their movements becoming erratic as their hive mind coordination faltered further. Kane allowed himself a small, grim smile. "That should buy us some time. All ships, regroup near the central asteroid cluster. We'll make our stand there." The human ships began to fall back, weaving through the asteroid field as the Zorvians struggled to pursue them. The jamming devices worked as intended, creating a chaotic battlefield where the humans' unpredictability gave them the upper hand. The ironclad Sentinel and the Celestial Fury moved to cover the retreat, their weapons blazing as they held the Zorvians at bay. The ironclad Sentinel, with its heavy armor and devastating firepower, absorbed hit after hit, its hull glowing red-hot but refusing to break. Captain Victor Steele stood on his bridge like a statue, his deep voice booming as he directed his crew. "Hold the line," he roared. "We're not letting them through." Beside him, the Celestial Fury danced through the chaos, its experimental weapons carving through Zorvian ships with deadly precision. Captain Lyra Vane's eyes burned with fierce determination as she guided her ship, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Focus fire on their largest ships," she commanded. "We'll give the others time to regroup." As the human fleet regrouped near the central asteroid cluster, the Zorvians began to recover from the effects of the jamming devices. Their ships moved with renewed purpose, their hive mind reasserting its control. Kane watched them approach, his mind racing. "We've bought ourselves a few moments," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "Now we have to make them count." The crew of the Solaris Vanguard prepared for the next wave, their faces set with grim determination. They knew the odds were against them. They knew the Zorvians would not stop until they were destroyed. But they also knew that every second they held the line was a second that Earth could use to prepare. As the Zorvian fleet closed in, the human ships turned to face them, their weapons charging for another assault. The battle was far from over, and the cost had already been high. But in the cold, unforgiving void of the Epsilon Crucible, humanity stood defiant. And the Zorvians would learn that even in the face of overwhelming odds, humans would fight. They would endure. And they would make their enemies bleed. The silence following the electromagnetic jamming was short-lived. The Zorvians, ever evolving, began to change their approach. Their ships, once moving in perfect unison, now acted with an unnerving independence. They split into smaller groups, flanking the human fleet with sharp, calculated maneuvers. It was as though the hive mind had fractured, allowing each vessel to think for itself. On the bridge of the Solaris Vanguard, Captain Kane watched the tactical display with a sinking feeling in his chest. The Zorvians were learning. Their adaptability was terrifying, and the humans' earlier advantage was slipping away. "They are moving faster," Lieutenant Voss noted, her voice tight with unease. "They are not hesitating anymore?" Kane's mind raced. The asteroid field was no longer enough to hide them. The Zorvians were picking apart their strategy piece by piece, and it was only a matter of time before the human fleet was overwhelmed. "We need to change the battlefield," Kane said suddenly, his voice cutting through the tension. He turned to his crew, his eyes sharp with determination. "The gas giant. We'll lure them into its atmosphere." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The gas giant loomed in the distance, its swirling clouds of crimson and gold churning like a living storm. The atmosphere was dense, chaotic, and filled with deadly turbulence. It was a dangerous place for any ship, let alone a fleet engaged in battle. "Captain," Voss began cautiously, "if we go in there?" "They won't expect it," Kane interrupted. "Their sensors will be disrupted. It's our best chance to catch them off guard." The crew hesitated for only a moment before nodding in agreement. They trusted Kane, and they knew he wouldn't make such a call unless it was their only option. "Send the order to the fleet," Kane commanded. "We're heading into the storm." The Solaris Vanguard led the charge, its engines blazing as it dove toward the gas giant. Behind it, the Zorvian ships pursued relentlessly, their glowing forms slicing through the darkness like knives. The human fleet followed closely, their smaller ships weaving through the chaos as they entered the planet's upper atmosphere. The gas giant's clouds enveloped them, swallowing the battlefield in a swirling haze of crimson and gold. Lightning crackled through the dense atmosphere, illuminating the storm in brief, blinding flashes. The turbulence rocked the ships violently, their hulls groaning under the strain. Inside the Solaris Vanguard, the crew clung to their stations as the ship shuddered and lurched. The air was thick with tension, the hum of the engines barely audible over the roar of the storm outside. "Hold steady," Kane ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Wait for my signal." The Zorvian ships followed them into the clouds, their movements less precise as their sensors struggled to cut through the interference. They hesitated, their formations breaking apart as they searched for their prey. Kane's lips curled into a faint smile. "Now," he said. The Solaris Vanguard erupted from the clouds, its weapons blazing. The surprise attack was devastating. The Zorvian flagship, the Eternal Dominion, took the brunt of the assault, its sleek black hull scarred and burning as explosions rippled across its surface. The other human ships joined the attack, their weapons lighting up the storm as they struck with relentless precision. The Zorvian fleet faltered, their ships retreating into the storm to regroup. The Eternal Dominion, its once imposing form now battered and broken, limped away, its engines flickering. Kane watched the tactical display, his chest heaving with relief. The maneuver had worked. But the battle was far from over. "Prepare to pull back," he ordered. "We've bought ourselves time, but we can't stay here." As the human fleet began its retreat, the storm seemed to grow even more violent. The gas giant's atmosphere churned around them, threatening to tear their ships apart. The Solaris Vanguard struggled to maintain its course, its engines straining against the turbulence. "Captain, we are losing power to the stabilizers," Voss reported, her voice taut with urgency. "Divert everything we have to the engines," Kane replied. "We need to get out of this storm." The ship groaned under the strain, its hull trembling as it climbed higher, away from the deadly clouds. The Zorvian fleet, though damaged, was still pursuing them, their dark forms emerging from the storm like predators scenting blood. Kane's jaw tightened. They wouldn't make it out in time. The Zorvians were too close, and the human fleet was too scattered to mount another defense. But then, a new sound filled the air. A faint hum at first, growing louder and louder until it became a deafening roar. "Captain," Voss said, her eyes wide as she stared at the tactical display. "We've got incoming ships. A lot of them." Kane turned to the viewport, his breath catching in his throat. Emerging from the darkness of space was a sight that filled him with both awe and relief. The United Sol Federation's main defense force had arrived. Over 300 warships, their hulls gleaming with the light of distant stars, moved into formation. Massive dreadnoughts, their sheer size dwarfing the other ships, led the charge, their weapons bristling with power. Fighter squadrons swarmed around them like a cloud of angry hornets, their engines glowing as they prepared for battle. At the center of the fleet was the flagship, a colossal vessel that radiated authority and strength. Admiral Harlan's voice came through the comms, steady and commanding. "This is Admiral Harlan of the United Sol Federation. All ships, engage the enemy. Let's show them what humanity is made of." The human fleet surged forward, their weapons blazing as they joined the fray. The Zorvians, caught between the storm and the overwhelming firepower of the reinforcements, faltered. Their ships, so deadly in isolation, were no match for the sheer scale of the Federation's fleet. The Solaris Vanguard pulled back, its crew watching in awe as the battle unfolded. The dreadnoughts unleashed devastating volleys, their weapons carving through Zorvian ships with ease. Fighter squadrons darted between the enemy vessels, their coordinated attacks leaving trails of fire and debris in their wake. Kane allowed himself a small, weary smile. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the tide of the battle was turning. "Admiral Harlan," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of exhaustion. "It's good to see you." Harlan's reply was calm, but there was a fire in his tone. "We're not done yet, Kane. Let's finish this." As the combined human fleet pressed the assault, the Zorvians began to retreat, their ships vanishing into the darkness of space. The storm of the gas giant raged on, but within it, humanity had found its strength. And for the first time, the Zorvians had been forced to flee. The battle was far from over, but in that moment, hope burned brighter than the stars. The void of space was alive with chaos. A symphony of destruction played out as the combined human fleet clashed with the Zorvian armada. The once pristine darkness was now a battlefield drenched in fiery explosions and streaks of energy that tore through the blackness like jagged lightning. Ships collided in a brutal dance of life and death, their hulls groaning and shattering under the relentless assault. The Solaris Vanguard, its once proud form now battered and scarred, pushed forward into the heart of the battle. Its engines roared defiantly, leaving trails of shimmering light as it darted through the carnage. Despite the damage it had sustained, the ship fought on with a determination that mirrored the spirit of its crew. Inside the bridge, Captain Kane stood tall, his face a mask of fierce resolve. The air was thick with tension, the hum of the ship's systems barely audible over the distant rumble of explosions. Around him, his crew moved with practiced precision, their hands flying over controls as they carried out his orders. "Target their command ships," Kane commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "If we take them out, we can break their formation." The crew obeyed without hesitation. The Solaris Vanguard unleashed a barrage of fire, its weapons striking true. A Zorvian cruiser erupted in a brilliant explosion, the light casting eerie shadows across the bridge. Cheers broke out among the crew, but Kane's expression remained grim. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of the battle. The Zorvians fought back with a ferocity that was almost mechanical in its precision. Their ships moved like predators, weaving through the human fleet with deadly grace. Yet, for all their power, there was a crack in their armor, a hesitation, a faltering that had not been there before. At the center of the Zorvian fleet, the Eternal Dominion loomed like a dark god, its massive form radiating an aura of menace. Overseer Vraxis watched the battle unfold from its command deck, his glowing eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. "The humans fight like cornered beasts," Vraxis muttered, his voice cold and sharp. "But even beasts can be broken." Yet, as he spoke, a flicker of doubt crept into his mind. The humans were not breaking. They were enduring, fighting with a desperation that defied logic. For every ship they lost, they took 2 Zorvian vessels with them. And the reinforcements, those massive dreadnoughts and swarms of fighters, were relentless. The Solaris Vanguard, leading a group of smaller ships, broke through the Zorvian lines. Its weapons targeted one of the Zorvian command ships, a sleek, angular vessel that directed the fleet's movements. The attack was swift and brutal. The command ship shuddered under the assault, its hull cracking before it erupted in a fiery explosion. On the Eternal Dominion, Vraxis felt the loss like a physical blow. His hive mind connection faltered, the unity of his fleet unraveling. He clenched his clawed hands, his glowing eyes narrowing as he realized the truth. The battle was lost. "Order the retreat," Vraxis growled, his voice filled with bitter rage. "This is not over." The Zorvian fleet began to pull back, their ships vanishing into the darkness one by one. The humans pressed the attack, their weapons blazing as they drove the invaders away. But Kane, watching the tactical display, held up a hand. "Let them go," he said quietly. "We've won." The battlefield was silent now, the echoes of war fading into the void. The once chaotic expanse of space was littered with the wreckage of ships, twisted metal and shattered hulls drifting aimlessly, illuminated by the faint glow of distant stars. The Solaris Vanguard hung in the stillness, its hull scorched and battered but still intact. Inside, the crews sat in stunned silence, the weight of what they had just endured settling over them like a heavy fog. Captain Kane stood at the viewport, his gaze fixed on the distant retreating forms of the Zorvian fleet. His shoulders were tense, his hands clasped behind his back. For a moment, he allowed himself to breathe, the realization of their victory sinking in. "We did it," Voss said softly, her voice breaking the silence. Kane turned to face his crew, his expression softening. "We did," he said, his voice carrying a quiet pride. "But it wasn't just us. Every ship, every crew member out there fought for this. For Earth. For humanity." The crew nodded, their faces a mix of exhaustion and relief. They had survived. Against all odds, they had survived. Back on Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. Across cities and continents, people gathered to celebrate, their cheers echoing through the streets. The invincible Zorvians had been defeated, their aura of dominance shattered. In the grand halls of the United Sol Federation, Earth's leaders stood before a sea of faces. The names of the fallen were read aloud, their sacrifices honored. But it was the crew of the Solaris Vanguard who were hailed as heroes. At the center of the ceremony, Captain Kane and his crew stood silently, their uniforms crisp but their faces weary. The applause was deafening, but Kane's mind was elsewhere. He thought of the lives lost, the ships that would never return. Victory had come at a cost, and he would carry that weight with him forever. As the ceremony ended, Admiral Harlan approached Kane, his expression one of respect. "You did well, Captain," Harlan said, his voice steady. "You and your crew held the line when no one else could. You gave us hope." Kane nodded, his gaze steady. "We did what we had to," he replied simply. That night, as the stars shone brightly over Earth, the crew of the Solaris Vanguard gathered in quiet reflection. They spoke of the battle, of the friends they had lost, and of the future they had fought to protect. The Zorvians had retreated, but the war was far from over. Humanity had won a battle, not the war. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment of peace, a moment to remember why they fought. And as the Solaris Vanguard prepared for its next mission, its crew knew one thing for certain: humanity would endure. No matter the odds, no matter the cost, they would fight. And they would survive. In the vast tapestry of the cosmos, where stars are born and die in the blink of an eye, the tale of humanity's struggle against the Zorvians stood as a testament to the indomitable spirit of a species that refused to be subdued. For centuries, the Zorvians had been a force of nature, sweeping across galaxies with an unyielding might that seemed insurmountable. Their ships, dark and silent, moved like shadows, casting fear into the hearts of those who dared to oppose them. Yet, amidst this seemingly endless night, a single beacon of hope emerged: a solitary warship named the Solaris Vanguard. It was more than just metal and machinery, it was the embodiment of human courage and ingenuity. Against all odds, it had faced the Zorvian armada and emerged victorious, not through sheer strength, but through the will and determination of its crew. The battle had been fierce, a storm of fire and fury that raged across the stars. But it was not just a battle for survival, it was a battle for the very soul of humanity. The Solaris Vanguard had shown the galaxy that humans were not mere creatures of flesh and bone, but beings capable of great resilience and defiance. In the face of annihilation, they had stood firm, their spirits unbroken. As the dust of battle settled, the significance of their victory became clear. The Zorvians, once thought invincible, had been challenged and defeated. The message sent across the stars was unmistakable. Humanity would not bow, would not break. They would fight for their right to exist, to thrive, and to chart their own destiny among the stars. The Solaris Vanguard had become a symbol, a rallying cry for all who dared to dream of freedom. It reminded the galaxy that even the smallest spark could ignite a flame of hope, and that hope could light the way through the darkest of times. The war with the Zorvians was far from over. The battle won by the Solaris Vanguard was but a single chapter in a much larger story. Yet, it was a chapter that had changed everything. It had shown that the Zorvians could be beaten, that their stranglehold on the galaxy was not absolute. As the people of Earth looked to the stars, they did so with renewed determination. United by a common cause, they prepared for the battles yet to come. Factories hummed with the production of new ships, training centers buzzed with the energy of recruits eager to join the fight, and leaders spoke of unity and resilience. The future was uncertain, the path ahead fraught with danger. But humanity had proven its resilience. They had shown that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they would stand together, fight together, and, if necessary, die together. The video concluded with a message of hope, a reminder that while the fight continued, so did the spirit of those who refused to be conquered. It was a promise to the galaxy and to themselves that they would not rest until peace was secured, until the threat of the Zorvians was but a distant memory. And as the stars shone brightly over Earth, the people looked up with a shared resolve, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For they knew that together, they could overcome any obstacle, and that their story was far from over.